Hey, welcome everybody. It's good to have half the team, at least. Dave Ferguson is with me. His brother John couldn't join us today, but we're here today to talk about their new book, Finding Your Way Back to God. I have it right here in my hands. Dave, first of all, for those that aren't familiar with your journey, can you tell us a little bit more about who you are and the church that you lead?
Sure. In a land long ago, my brother and I and a few friends from college, we moved back to the Chicago area, planted a church called Community Christian Church. We had as a mission to help people find their way back to God. We've stuck pretty relentlessly to that mission, and it's really connected with people's hearts. We're at 13 different locations across Chicagoland. Kind of as an outgrowth of that, we also got to start something called a New Thing, which has 150 some churches across the country, and now a couple thousand really that are a part of that internationally. And then I also get to be the president of Exponential Conference, which also is kind of another extension of helping people find their way back to God through accelerating movements of new churches.
That's fantastic, and we'll probably come back to that story toward the end of our conversation, Dave. But again, the purpose is about your book, Finding Your Way Back to God. You mentioned it from the very beginning of your church. This has really been part of your mission. In fact, is it the mission statement of your church? Is it part of that?
Yeah, I mean, the mission statement is helping people find their way back to God.
Okay, so with that, why don't you just start with what prompted at this point in your journey for you and John to write the book?
Yeah. We actually I actually was having conversations with, publishers were approaching me about writing the book. And then, of course, they always want to know, well, what thing makes your heart beat really fast? And this is always the conversation. It genuinely, I can get a little bit of an adrenaline rush just talking about it and thinking about it. And probably about 7 years ago, I kind of came to a place with actually the publisher we're with now and said, okay, let's do it. I think we're ready. And truthfully, they hired a collaborator to work with me because they're going like, I don't know if you have the time right now. And we probably got about 2 chapters into it, and the collaborator sent me these couple chapters after interviewing me and stuff. And it was great content,
yeah,
but it wasn't how we talk about helping people find their way back to God. So I said, you know what, let's just call a time out so we can do it the way that's really true to who we are.
Mm-hmm.
And so about a year and a half ago or 2 years ago, again, talked to a guy named David Kopp, who's a great editor. And I said, okay, I think we're really ready. And they also were ready to really kind of put the right kind of marketing horsepower behind what had been actually my own personal mission statement and the mission statement of the church. And so we said, okay, let's do it now. And I think it was the exact right time.
Yeah. So let's start with your story then. Why is this your personal mission statement?
When I was in college, I grew up as a pastor's kid, and it was actually a good experience for me, a very positive experience. But I did kind of resent the fact that people thought I was going to be a pastor. And so I went to college. I had aspirations to be an attorney and maybe go into politics and several things like that. But somewhere in college, my freshman year, the question of what are you going to trade your life for, and came up, and I began to take that very seriously. And in the phrase that at least I use now is the thing I want to trade my life for. You know what? The most important thing I could do is if I could help people find their way back to God, that would be worth trading my life for. Well, God kind of backdoored me, and it was kind of, well, the best way to help people find their way back to God is probably through local churches. And how do you start one and then start lots of them? And usually the person that does that, they call a pastor. Mm-hmm. So I ended up being a pastor, even though I wasn't really that excited about it. But what I did always love from probably age 19 was this vision of how can I help people find their way back to God?
That's great. So I didn't know, you and I have some similarities there. Way back in the day, I thought I was going to be an attorney and a politician too. So who knows, Dave, maybe we can hook up and run for office sometime in the future. What do you think?
Considering the options, I think we might have a good chance.
All right. Well, in the book, you and John talk about these 5 awakenings, and I'm not going to give it away, but I do want to press a little bit of the 5. Which one is the one that you think is most pressing in people's lives? Do you have a sense of that?
Yeah, and I don't mind giving away a little bit. What we did with these awakenings is we kind of looked over our shoulder over the last, 20 some years, and we kind of saw this path that a lot of people walked, but we actually never gave them names. We kind of pointed people in the direction. Here's how you find your way back to God, but we never actually kind of gave them mile markers or mileposts. And we took about 25 folks, did some intense interviews, videotaped them, studied their stories over and over again. And what emerged were these 5 different awakenings. I would say probably awakening number 3, which is awakening to help. I think that particular awakening maybe is the one that's the most profound, because what happens for a lot of folks is in the first 2 awakenings, they kind of get stuck in this cycle. And we actually call it the sorry cycle, where it's this, the first awakening is awakening to the longings that we have. And then we pursue those without God, which is leads to the second awakening, which is awakening to regret. And a lot of people get stuck in that cycle over and over again. Think about, in your longing for love, you pursue the wrong people, you pursue the wrong, stuff that can lead to addictions like pornography and other things. And it always leads back to regret. Awakening to regret. And we heard that over and over again, that they have these awakening of longing. I'm saying longing to regret, longing to regret. And that finally you get to the end of yourself and you go, you know what I really need, I need help. Because I just keep doing this over and over again. And that's the third awakening, the awakening to help. And that really is the pivot point for a lot of people, I think.
And so how do you approach once that is identified? Give some sense of, in your book, how you approach the next steps then you encourage people to take.
Well, and I think everybody has to kind of almost come to the end of themselves and realize I can't do this on my own.
Right.
And that's kind of in a phrase what the awakening to help is. And when you finally come to that, then I think you're open. You're really open to go, okay, maybe there is a God. Maybe there is a God that can help me. And I think it's chapter 11. We actually say help has a name, and we say the name is Jesus. And I think when you've tried to satisfy this longing for love and it doesn't work without Him, or a longing for purpose, and either you don't feel a direction or you have this overzealous ambition that ends up in a drivenness and almost crushes you and the people you love around you, or you have so much pain in your life and you try to make sense out of it, all these questions, how do you make sense out of things that don't make sense, and you can't do it without Him? You finally get to the point where you're going, okay, I need something else. And that's where we really offer, okay, maybe Jesus is the answer here.
All right. So this morning, before you and I got on this recording, we were talking a little bit about the fact that your church is right now in the middle of a series around this topic. And what prompted the conversation and the story you shared was related to how do you continue to find your strength, your energy, your desire to do what you do after all these years in ministry, Dave? Would you mind again kind of expressing that and sharing what you shared about your message preparation and the stories that are coming out of that?
Yeah, sure. The motivation for me, and I don't know, your audience will have to decide if they trust me or believe me or not. This is not a pitch for the book, because we've been doing this for a long time. I genuinely love seeing people find their way back to God. To me, there is nothing like it. And I think for me, I think there's a part of me that finds my way back to God every time when I hear one of those stories. It reminds me of the absolute truth about who I am. So like this morning, I'm working on a talk because we're actually getting ready to work. This weekend's going to be awakening number 3, awakening to help. And we're going to give people a chance to really say, you know what? My life there's parts of it that are totally out of control and I need help. And so as we were working on it this morning, I was all by myself in the restaurant, and I was playing one of the videos we're going to watch this weekend. And it's a young lady who, she's just terrific. But as she tells her story, she grew up at age 2. Her parents were divorced. She lived with her grandmother, who was abusive. Age 16, she ended up in a relationship with a guy that she thought was going to be the answer. Here we are, these longings for love, right? He was abusive. She has a kid. Oh, maybe that's going to satisfy my longing for purpose. It ends up in a disaster, multiple affairs. And then finally she comes into herself, and she ends up finding her way back to God. And to hear her story and to have her be able to, with such authenticity and almost like no fear, tell her story to our whole church. I mean, I love the fact that she's discovered grace in God for her personally, but she's also discovered a place that's gracious, that she can tell her whole story. And at the first weekend of this series, I finished up the talk, and we had someone a very similar story. She was actually an atheist, and all kinds of reasons why. But she got baptized at the end of the service. I mean, the whole place, and just told this gut-wrenching story of terrible tragedy. The whole place stood up and gave her a standing ovation. Mm-hmm. And I even told told everybody. I was actually speaking at our Yellow Box location. I said, you know what, I should just skip the whole talk. We should just gone straight to this baptism and had her tell her story.
Yes.
And if you can't tell, I mean, I love that. Mm. And I don't know. And that, so to me, that's worth getting out of bed every morning, and it's worth trading my life for.
All right. So, Dave, as you might be aware, a lot of the folks that are going to be watching this are church leaders, they're pastors. And so let's spin this just for a moment as you look at the church broadly. What's one of the key barriers that's preventing the church from helping people find their way back to
God? Tony, like you, I'm a big believer in the power of leadership. And I think if you want to create a culture that helps people find their way back to God, I'll use whatever term you want. Maybe it's whatever term you decide to use. That's our phrase. But if you want to create a culture like that, I think the number one culture creator is the senior leadership. And hang on one second. I'm going to grab something as a prop.
Sure.
And this is my journal. There you go.
Okay.
One of the things that on a consistent basis that I do is I have a list of about 10 or 12 people. And these are people that I'm praying for that are far from God. Mm-hmm. And at the top of the list is a young lady who I think is going to be at church this weekend, probably the third or fourth time in her adult life. And it's someone I know from a restaurant. Underneath that are a couple of my neighbors who just recently started coming for the very first time. And I'm not going to be so naive as to say that cures everything. But I'll tell you what, if you do have a leadership gift, and leadership really is this idea that you influence other people to change them. The number one thing you can do if you want to create that kind of a culture in your church is you begin to do it. But I also encourage your church leaders, find ways to work those stories into your messages, into your equipping of other people so they know you're doing it. Make this implicit thing explicit and say, okay, no, this is what it means to be a Christ follower around here. And I think if you do that, there's lots of other things. I'd love to talk about that sometime if you're interested.
Yeah.
But I think that's the number one thing I would say. You be the culture creator. Kind of, you be the change you want to see happen.
That's fantastic. Great challenge, Dave. All right. So here's what I believe. This is one of those books that you're going to want to pick up and read, but also with the churches that I've been a part of in the past, every once in a while, we've decided we're just going to buy this book for the entire congregation, and we're going to go through it together. We're going to have a series on that. And as a church, we're going to focus on that. Sounds like that's the type of thing that you are doing right now at your church, Dave.
That's right. And as church leaders, they'll be interested to know, we're actually putting together a package right now because that's part of the idea. If we do the series now, so we'll have complete word-for-word manuscripts. We'll actually have the bumper and the PowerPoint and videos, all kinds of stuff. And anybody who wants to do the series this fall, probably like July through the end of the year, we're going to give away all that stuff for free.
That's fantastic.
So can I give a website?
Sure, please do that, Dave.
So if they want to go to yourwayback.org, yourwayback.org. There's a whole bunch of resource information there, but it'll actually give you the opportunity to sign up, and your church could sign up, and we'll give you, the exact talk that I'm doing this weekend, and it's word for word manuscript, and you'll get all 5 of those plus a whole bunch of other resources for free. And I think this could really be a difference-making series for your church.
I agree, Dave. So again, the book is Finding Your Way Back to God, and tell John we appreciate his involvement in the project too. All right, Dave, thanks for joining us today.
Hey, my pleasure, Tony.